you know, that lecture, that interview is online, and we actually cover a number of things in nutrition, training, adherence, and otherwise. It's good. You guys can go ahead and, you know, watch that if you guys want. It'll probably actually, some of the things we talk about do actually relate back directly to what you guys are covering in class. But remember, your metabolic project is due. Make sure you make all of the graphs that are assigned. You can see the rubric in the syllabus. It's also, you got the information online. Make sure you get those in, because it turns out that's an easy way to get another close to 100 points on your grade in this class. So make sure you're doing it. If you don't do that, you really shoot yourself in the foot really, really hard. And then otherwise, the king of the hill is out there, which is whoever gets the highest grade on that gets an immediate extra 100 points on their final grade in the class. It's just a battery of all the homework questions you guys have had so far. And then obviously we don't have lecture next week. And then your final is going to be open online until effectively now through the Thursday of finals week. So you can take it early. Remember the group one, you guys are more than comfortable. You guys can take that whenever you want. If you take the group one before you take the individual one, you're just going to get a 0 on the individual one. So make sure you take your individual one first, then you take your group one. But otherwise, the final is all ready to rumble. We'll finish tonight with a brief review, but then from there, guys, I want you to go ahead and you can email me questions and I'll go ahead and record them, you know, kind of like I'm doing right now, and put those online. In fact, I did that with 3 of your guys' questions from last week on nutrition and training adaptations. They were very good. And I wanted to, you know, more than just like kind of one line, which frequently is, it depends, but give you guys something you guys can look at. Jai, what's next Thursday, buddy? Yeah, next week is Thanksgiving. So this is the last night we're all going to meet. True, but you guys also have a very interesting and uncomfortable past with how you guys, how, you know, the Europeans that colonized it, specifically mostly the British, then, you know, did some not so great thing to the native people. So you guys do have that in common with America. So, but my goal is not to get political. So body comp, we touch upon it obviously in a myriad of other classes. There's obviously wide variances. If your real goal is to live as long as possible and be healthy, you probably want to keep yourself between effectively the good and acceptable range. The reason you don't want to be that lean for most people is it's difficult to stay that lean. You can definitely have some issues with potential health outcomes. In fact, a lot of females, when they get under 12% body fat, now we're going to have a lot more issues with effectively health and performance. I get a laugh. I was like, yeah, of the average population, yeah, the average person is not that lean. You guys have been to Walmart before? No, that's fiction, but that's okay. That's okay. It's hard to be super lean. Now, on the other side, the reason you don't want a very high body fat is it's just extra weight to carry around. Now, you can be healthy at any body fat percentage, and genetics is always going to play a part, as is obviously lifestyle. So the big key is, at the end of the day, guys, is focusing on body composition when it comes to performance with your athletes. So different sports, obviously, you can see higher body comps. Other sports, you see lower body comps. But even then, it's how that athlete performs in that sport at that weight, at that body composition. So, you know, obviously we've got some guys in here and gals that are D1 athlete in different sports. And like anything else, the body fat and the lean mass that they have and the body weight overall, yeah, it's very much so per individual. So yeah, if we increase your lean mass, you'll probably be a better athlete, but that's not always true. Specifically when you think about sports like long distance running, just because it's extra mass you've got to carry everywhere. And then on the other side, you know, we can sometimes just want to carry more mass in general, and some of it being fat mass, when we're looking at people like offensive linemen, like sumo wrestlers, and so on. So remember, it's not just the body composition, it's how that athlete performs. So who cares what body fat you are, as long as you're doing and you're able to perform at the things you want to be able to perform at. So, questions about general body composition and everything. Okay. Now, there's a number of different models. The one that we use with things like the bod pod and then underwater weighing is what's known as the two components or two compartment model, where you have fat mass, which is not just what makes you self-conscious at the beach. Also, your nervous system is made pretty much of nothing but fat. Your bone marrow is also made of nothing but fat. Then you have fat-free mass, which is not just muscle, tendon, ligament, bone, internal organs, skin, your blood, and pretty much all the fluids inside of the body. Well, all of your other organs. Then we have the three compartment model, and that's where we're adding in bone mass, and we go to 4 compartment. Now we're talking about total body water on top of that. Now, most people tend to be pretty consistent with their body composition over time. BODPOD uses air displacement plethysmography, aka it figures out how much space you take up inside. From there, it knows how much you weigh. You get an estimate of your density. Denser people are leaner people, and they extrapolate. Now, a question for the audience is, do you guys understand what the basis of body composition assessment, where it comes from? Like how they did the initial tests? From skin fold calipers, underwater weighing, everything in between. What did they do? Thank you, Hannah. Turns out they measured corpses, melted them down, and figured out how much fat went to the top. So the skin fold calipers were all based, I believe, initially on like 7 to 10 dead white guys. And so they used those formulas to extrapolate what body comp is. Every single measure, whether we're using something really high quality like a DEXA or not so great like those hand bioelectrical impedance measures, none of them are going to be 100% accurate. They're all getting close to the truth, but to really 100% know what your body fat is a one-off. Like, you literally have to kill the person, measure how much fat goes to the top, and then figure it out from there. So we have a lot of different ways we can do it. There's more that are being developed every single day. There's some interesting 3D modeling based upon effectively taking girths, which you effectively just stand in your birthday suit and slowly spin in front of a camera, probably when we're underwear, just in case that finds its way on the internet somehow from a hacker. And it extrapolates what it thinks your body comp is, or body composition is. The key is you want to be reliable. You want to take and do the same measurements over and over again, meaning the same technology, the same preparation, so you can get an idea of trending. Because trending is really what you're most interested in. Are you gaining lean mass or losing lean mass? Are you gaining fat mass? Are you losing fat mass? Is it more important if it's just globally, or is it more important if we know the local changes? And that's where girth measurements, things like DEXA scanners, are more important. Because things like the BODPOD, underwater weighing, they're just going to give you information for your total body. So and we've actually seen this at EKU, we had an athlete that tore their ACL, so they couldn't obviously run around and use their legs as much as they did. They lost 4 pounds of lean mass on their legs, but they also gained 4 pounds of lean mass in their upper body because they just got after it like a bodybuilder in the gym with their upper training. So when we BODPODed them, their body composition was the exact same. Because they lost the 4 pounds of lean mass off one leg, but they managed to put 4 pounds of lean mass on their upper body. Now, by numbers, you'd think that athlete was like, oh, good, they haven't changed. Like, oh, no, they've changed. The key is what's happened locally. Any questions with the basics of different approaches for measuring body composition? This is just a basic idea of effectively how quickly electricity, the resistance is going to have. So the ohms is a higher resistance, which is the capital omega if we're going Greek. If we happen to have things like oil, so it effectively is naturally insulated, it's going to have a high resistance, so electricity is not going to come through as quickly. So that's what the bioelectrical impedance, that's all about, is it's trying to go electricity as quickly as you can. Muscle, electrolytes, that's excitable, so it's going to go quickly. Fat is slow, so greater amount of fat mass. slower conduction times. The happy little sites that you get to pinch and inch, which you guys should hopefully remember slightly from exercise physiology. And there are a number of different approaches depending on what type of groups you're working with. You can run those formulas. Then there's obviously going to be what we can just quickly extrapolate what would be body composition based upon those skin fold measurements, given whoever you're working with. And then we have the wonders of the BMI. The BMI is an absolute, it's special. Do you guys know the origin of the body mass index? Awesome, thank you guys. Getting more people telling me they don't know, which I appreciate. So the body mass index was actually originally developed by a British mathematician in the 1800s. And he was just trying to have a basic way to figure out if someone's underweight or overweight. And the funny thing is his formulas that he wanted to use was actually, instead of your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared, it was actually going to be, instead of to the second power, it was going to be the 2.5 power. But that requires a lot more calculations. And since that was back in the day when everyone had to do everything by hand or using an abacus, because we didn't have calculators other than this one, they literally just made it lazy and did what they did. Now, the problem with the BMI is if you guys look at the graph, you can see how it's relatively easy for a tall person to be marked effectively as being overweight or obese, even though they're just tall, and it's hard to be tall and not be heavy. And the flip side is weighted the other way, where shorter individuals, they effectively are not rated as being as overweight and obese as one would suspect. So, questions on the BMI? Okay. You can also use girth measurements. This can be a pretty useful way to just figure out what's going on. I actually suggest most people do this if they just want to simple, like take your own measurements at home. And things like, yes, being a bro, measuring your arm size, but measuring your chest size, your waist at the narrowest point while relaxed, around your hips at their widest point while relaxed. Thighs are tricky because they're so conical. It's easy to not necessarily get a good measurement there. But by getting those measurements, if your waist measurement's decreasing and all of your measurements are decreasing, you're definitely losing weight and likely losing some fat mass and probably some lean mass. If your waist measurement is going down, your arm measurement is staying the same, it's pretty likely you're losing fat mass but maintaining your lean mass. And then obviously, if your waist is going up and nothing else is, it's probably just gaining fat mass. And let's face it, most people, the way they are on the scale, their body composition has no real meaning to them. The thing that's actually probably going to be important to them is more just simple aesthetics, how they feel, and how they look. So girth measurements can be an absolutely appropriate tool. And as you guys would obviously surmise, you can happen to have a higher BMI and based upon how you carry that weight, have a much different physical appearance than someone that's, sedentary, not physically active, etc. So the other thing is BMI was also kind of racist, only working with white people. Your individuals that are African-American, Hispanic, typically have a higher BMI, even though they're still healthy just because carrying a little bit more lean mass, specifically muscle mass, than your average Caucasian. And your average individual of Asian descent has the flip side where they're actually typically a little bit lower on the BMI, but that's just typically because they tend to be a little bit smaller of frame. Now, the problem with all of this is like I just said, it's on average. There is a huge amount of variability in builds thanks to, if we try to break people down by race, because there's a lot of variety within the races. Like we have a lot of differences between us genetically so that, yeah, at the end of the day, just focus on health. Oh, sorry. So this is just the basic regression equation. So this is the actual relationships they're trying to do when it comes to those skin folds and what you're going to see for body composition and extrapolation. But at the end of the day, really what we're looking at is we're trying to have a greater amount of accuracy, which we're going to get more accuracy by literally using not just higher quality methods, but using them in conjunction. We have other areas that are not very accurate and they don't have a high degree of precision. So we got a huge variability in body composition measurements. We have others that are highly accurate, but they can easily be very misleading as far as they're off on their measurements. And the more methods we use to measure body composition, the better job we're probably going to do with being able to be accurate with those measurements. So before we start the next lecture, I'm going to have you guys go ahead and you guys are going to work in groups. Okay. The goal is we're going to have effectively 3 different scenarios. So what I want you guys to go ahead and essentially come up with is effectively what body comp tests would you want to use while being as efficient with both time and money. Okay. Group 1 is going to have an entire football team and only 1 hour. Group 2, well, thank you, is going to have a basketball team and also only 1 hour. And then finally, group 3 is going to be working with 4 athletes recovering from surgery. So I want you guys to come up with how frequently would you want to test body composition for your group? On top of the other parts we just discussed. Any questions here, guys, before we're going to randomize you and put you in groups, and then we're going to move on from body comp on to weight management. All right, guys, when you're ready, go ahead and hop in your groups, and I will see you guys in a little bit. All right, guys, when you're ready, go ahead and post in what you guys came up with. Post in what you guys came up with. Okay, that's not bad, Jai. Yeah, with a basketball team that size, you could maybe go with a little bit nicer of a BIS system. So like the SOZO we have in the lab or some of the other more 8-point as opposed to 4-point BIS, but that's a good idea.
You mean like the ultrasound one?
That's another method.
But that would probably
we
be
also have, but this is the one that you stand on, then you also put your hands on it also.
Okay. Oh, that's the one I was talking. I didn't know what it was called. The one just outside like the door.
Yeah. So that's called a BIS system, bioelectrical impedance spectroscopy, because it does it across an entire range of frequencies. And yeah, it's nicer. Yes, the DEXA more frequently with a smaller number. DEXAs take 7 to 15 minutes depending on how big you are, but that's going to give you a lot more information. You're really going to see what's going on in that specific limb or area of the body where they had surgery. Good job. Oh, I don't like the idea of doing the BMIs, but you know, you're right. Or that's where you could do that 4-point Tanita scale where you just step up and go. But trying to skin fold caliper that many athletes in that period of time, unless you've got 2, 3, 4 people doing the skin fold calipers. And let's face it, if you had 100 DEXA scanners and 100 people that could run them, then you could run all those athletes through in 1 hour. But yeah, good guys, good. So solid. The next one we're going into is talking about obviously weight management, which plays into the body composition. That's why we tag team them. And I put a link up. It's the www.niddk.nih.gov/bodyweight planner, BWP. We're going to use it in a little bit, and that'll be your next activity. But that's why I want to have it there so you guys can see it if you need to. So as you suspect, you see body weights and body comps that tend to gravitate in pretty, consistent levels in different sports, which makes sense. There's a selection. So you just want to try to match the athlete to the sport. Now, with that being said, let's keep in mind we have limitations of things like the frame of the athlete, the metabolism of the athlete. There's a number of things that are just not going to work too well. So, for example, you guys have met me before in person, most of you, where if I was going to try to be a long distance runner, aside from having to lose a lot of weight, which I appreciate, that's actually what one of the track kids said to me the other day in the athletic training room. Not being a jerk, just a true observation. But the other thing I'd have to do is somehow find a way to make my bone structure be narrower. So I didn't have literally as heavy and as broad of a skeleton to carry around, because that's not efficient when you're trying to be a long distance athlete. So, keep in mind, give them goals, and we're going to talk about how we're going to set those up in a little bit, but be mindful of the fact of, if someone wants to play football and they weigh 150 pounds and they want to be a lineman, if you try to put on 50 pounds in 1 year on them, you're going to likely be throwing on a lot of fat and not as much lean as you want, along with probably not helping the performance too much. So you really want to make sure that we're doing these changes gradually. And so, as you'd suspect, guys, there's always going to be a relatively large genetic component, in that when you're looking about both weight gain and weight loss, individuals from twin studies, they tend to gain and lose weight with, relatively, consistent changes based upon, thanks to, once again, who your parents are. Now, notice with a body weight change, guys, you see how, the lowest gain was only 5 pounds, but notice there was a set of twins that also gained over 12 pounds each. And then when the same thing is said about weight loss, notice there was a set of twins that one lost only 8 pounds and another lost 2 pounds. So unfortunately, genetics play a role in this as well. It's not that you cannot rise above them. The key is the methodology they used with this approach was not as effective. And you're going to have to do certain things to get a little bit more aggressive to disrupt homeostasis to be able to get people to those weights you're looking for. So when we're thinking about our total amount of energy and just general caloric intake, what you're going to find is that, how much someone's going to be taking in. So this knows how much of their diet is just dietary, how much of that is fat. So notice it's calorimeter variable, free living variable, and free living constant, and how much more calories people are going to be eating when they have those sources that are around them all the time, not to mention whenever they no longer have those choices. An easy way to lose weight is, be locked in essentially solitary confinement and only get fed whatever food they give you. Does not sound like a very good way to, maintain your mental health, much less your health in general. So yes, we need to figure out what approach is going to work. And it's important to understand there's a lot of ways that we regulate our appetite, some of which are actually going to be signaling from their body simply because we're low on fuel. But a number of things are literally based upon smelling food, tasting food, and sometimes, a little desire for nutrients, but also notice memory, time of day, how many like, oh, I got up, I got to eat breakfast, or it's noon, I got to take a lunch break, or it's dinner. Social situations. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, which everyone can teach Jai a little bit more about it. And somehow he's never really learned that much about in his time here, and that's okay. But, it's a very social situation where it's like, turns out you're going to go hang out and you're going to go eat a lot of food as, your family, friend unit, etc. And then obviously some folks are going to eat more because they're stressed. Some people are going to eat less because they're stressed. And exercise and physical activity have some major effects on our appetite, which we'll get to in a little bit. We've got not just our ghrelin, we also have our adiponectin. We've got definitely some information from our GI along with our liver and pancreas, all of which are going to be informing our own desire to eat. So one of the major flaws with a lot of research you see, it's usually more with animals, like a mouse model. Like when we gave the mouse a high fat diet, they ate more of it. And usually the high fat is they just put Crisco in the food or lard. Then if they give them a high sugar diet, they eat more sugar. But what's fascinating, when you actually give animals the wide variety of incredibly palatable foods that humans have, that's when they go buck wild and gain a lot of weight. So it's not the high sugar that's the problem. It's not the high fat that's the problem. It's high palatability and high caloric content is something that we're just not designed for. You know, your average human living in the savannah didn't need to worry, didn't need to worry about overeating. They needed to worry about starving. That was the major issue. So anytime they came across anything that tastes good, they pounded that thing down till it was gone. Think about it. In nature, the only thing that you're going to find that's that sweet naturally, aside from fruit, is going to be probably pure honey. And you're gonna have to work to get that honey, and it's going to hurt. Whereas now you guys can go down to a vending machine and get something that's way tastier than raw honey or any piece of fruit you can go buy in any market, much less obviously find in the wild. And turns out it's a little bit more difficult for us to, have to have that other form of self-control. A little bit, a little bit. There's gonna be a bit of difference in the amount of just kind of baseline hunger you're gonna have. There's definitely genetic components for it outside of just being male or female. Arguably, what we're gonna find is it's mostly linked to your activity level, along with there's really, it seems to be more the adiponectin and ghrelin release, and or also remember guys, not just the hormone, but it's the receptors for the hormone. So the receptor sensitivity for that hormone, that's going to be informing us about when we would like to eat or eat more. So the major reason why your average guy typically eats more than your average girl is because your average guy is bigger than your average girl. That's it. So one thing that's really, really fascinating, which is as exercise amount increases, so does the actual energy input. So when you're more physically active, you are literally going to be hungrier. You're going to want to eat more. When you're less physically active, you're not going to be that effectively hungry. But this relationship completely breaks down in individuals that are sedentary. When individuals are sedentary, they tend to massively out eat their effective energy inputs. And because of that, they think, or they not necessarily think about, but they naturally, because they're dysregulated, eat way more than they should, which in turn is the reason why the body weight goes up. Hence why one of the easier things to do to help with controlling your energy intake is to start to be physically active, not massively, but just start to be some, which then lends itself to the constrained versus the additive model of energy expenditure. Now, what this means is people often think of it as additive, like I'm being physically active now, so that means I'm going to burn so many more calories during the day than I would have otherwise. But remember, guys, we talked about changes in resting metabolic rate. We talked about perhaps changes in thermic effect of food, changes in your non-activity exercise, or yes, non-activity exercise, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Oh, sorry, long day. Now, notice that over time, that physical activity, yes, it adds more calories that we burn than we did initially, but it's not going to be as much of a boom, direct relationship of massively increasing how many calories we're going to burn each day, which is important because this is why whatever method you use to lose weight is the same method you need to go ahead and use to maintain it. Nice. Ghrelin is not something that I have seen being used for signaling, much less with adiponectin for getting people to effectively try to go to the body weight that you'd hope to get them to. Makes sense why you'd want to try it, but I haven't seen anything about someone trying to do that. And you would also have to inject it because it is a protein-based hormone. So hence, we're going to find that you're going to eat more if you're more physically active. Now, if you're doing insane volumes of physical exercise, you're probably actually not going to eat as much as you need to for that training, which is another weird situation specifically observed in people that happen to be in special forces when they were doing maneuvers in, I believe it was the Norwegian wilderness, where they were burning up to 7,000 to 8,000 calories per day from physical activity, from carrying heavy rucks and going up, mountains in the snow. And then obviously they had the cold stress on top of that, but they weren't eating enough calories to push that back because they just weren't even hungry because they were so exhausted from all the physical labor. And then the same dysregulation you see from the end of the spectrum on the other direction where people are just sedentary. So there's a lot of different ways to go effectively and try to get somebody to lose weight. At the end of the day, all we're looking at is you have to decrease your energy intake compared to your energy output. That's it. You just got to make sure you're in a deficit. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, from obviously decreasing one macronutrient. Effectively, there's 3 different parts that effectively someone is going to try to manipulate for losing weight in a diet. One of which is changing the macronutrient composition, one of which is changing the timing, and one of which is going to be changing effectively the total calorie intake. And no matter what, it's all pushed by the calorie intake. But like anything else, if someone finds a method that works, they tend to become evangelical about it. And that's why you'll always have somebody that tells you in order to lose weight, you got to be a vegan, you've got to go carnivore, you've got to go keto, you've got to go high carb, you've got to go high protein, etc. All we're really talking about is those manipulations of those basic variables that are underlying it, where we're talking about timing, macronutrient composition, and which can necessarily lend itself into food choices, and then still giving yourself that caloric deficit. So there's not one method that I would suggest so much as find what works for you. Any questions about any of the common diets? I try to list a number of them that are relatively interesting or relatively frequently seen. Manipulation of energy density is just effectively eating foods that don't have as many calories in it. So this would be the equivalent of if you had to eat, broccoli to maintain your weight, you'd have to eat so much damn broccoli. It would be rough. Obviously, there's a lot of people that use non-nutritive sweeteners, aka diet beverages, to help with weight control. I think the zone diet was the basic idea of 1/3 of your calories come in from carbs, 1/3 from protein, 1/3 from fat. Food combining diets is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, which is the idea of if you only have this food with this food, it won't make you fat, which once again, it comes down to caloric balance. And then I know I don't have the ketogenic diet on there, but that's obviously one. You've seen the carnivore diet has recently kind of gone up a little bit into certain areas. Paleo diet is another one. And then obviously we've got intermittent fasting. So just eating on basic time limits. I'll tell you what, it's an incredibly effective method if you're trying to get somebody to lose weight, to say that you have exactly 6 minutes to eat every single day. You'll lose weight. If you only have 6 minutes to eat every single day, dear God, I mean, you would have to be on like the Kobayashi. Is that the guy who's the really good food eater? I know there's like, was it like something Racer X? Joey Chestnut, that's the other guy who's really good at competitive food eating, I think. But outside of those guys, I don't know who else is going to be able to put down that many calories in 6 minutes to maintain their body mass.
Parker.
Shots fired. So if you're going to use exercise as a means for weight loss, obviously you're just talking about a deficit. This could mean doing HIIT training. This could mean doing long, slow distance. This could mean doing resistance training. Personally, I'm a fan of resistance training. Why? Because you're increasing your lean mass, which in turn is going to help a little bit with burning more calories in general. And in turn, you're also burning calories while you're lifting weights. So it's not just paying you now, but it's also paying you back later. Whereas things like walking, the second you're done walking is the second you're done burning any extra calories, because it's not that hard on your physiology. It doesn't take much to recover from it. You're going to be ready to go the next day. Now, the mode of exercise obviously becomes more important the older you get, because your body's probably not going to like the hard pounding of miles. You need to pick some type of endeavor that's not going to bang you up and is going to allow you to be, physically active without a lot of pain. So as far as if someone changes their body mass, this is why yo-yo dieting can be really hard, but it's still better to try than to never try it at all, which is when you actually have that change in body mass, you're going to have a decrease in turn with your resting energy expenditure and your total energy expenditure. And then the same is to be said about when you gain weight. Now, the problem is the change that you're going to have overall, it's not going to completely offset those weight changes. So you can have situations where people literally are going to effectively start to suppress their own natural resting metabolic rate. So effectively, even if they go back to their old level of eating, they'll actually overshoot their initial body weight simply because now they're not burning as many calories per day. Thank you, Zach. So if your goal is long-term weight manipulation, so you're trying to gain muscle mass, lose fat mass, anything along those lines, it's important to go through phases of this information, meaning you typically don't want to make a mass phase be more than 3 months, or a fat loss stage being more than 3 months. And obviously maintenance is just holding on to that new weight. The reason why you want to gain that lean mass and maintain is you allow your tissues to become essentially resensitized. So if you're going to try to gain weight again, you would have a better chance of trying to gain more, because you're going to see this kind of flattening plateau effect the longer you're in a weight loss or a weight gain essentially cycle. So you want to give yourself time where you essentially get your body back to its new normal at this new body weight, which of course is going to require still manipulations of your calories and manipulation of your exercise levels. Now, you might necessarily not want to go for a full 3 months, might only be a month, might be 2 months, but you probably then want to do about 2 months of allowing yourself to resensitize. And this is a good thing. Yeah. The year-long bulk is probably not a good idea, but it comes down to, once again, it depends. If you told me we've got somebody who's a recovering anorexic, I would say, okay, let's try to consistently move you up towards the weight that we've come to a general consensus is the healthy place where we want you to be. And so if it takes a full year to get that person to that weight, then that might be the methodology used. And or if you give me someone who's like on the biggest loser size of, you give me a 400-pound person that should legitimately weigh only 150 pounds, then yeah, we might be in a weight loss phase for close to an entire year. Now, there's periods of time where we might try to push the weight loss a little bit faster. There's periods of time where we're going to try to push the weight loss a little bit slower. But in general, when in doubt, guys, figure it's going to be 1% of body mass a week, or typically only 1 pound. So if you're going more than 1% of body mass per week, that's really freaking aggressive. And I would really suggest you slow that down, because it's going to be so hard to maintain that for long periods of time. Now, you do have that initial weight loss thanks to glycogen changes, but you don't want to get to be too aggressive, because, like I said, you're going to find a situation where, yeah, your initial bulk, you probably are gaining a pretty solid amount of lean mass. And then from there, okay, you're getting lean mass and fat mass. And then eventually you're just gaining fat mass. My friend Mike, who I interviewed earlier, and like I said, take a look and listen, it's really good. He's brilliant. And he openly admits that he should not have actively tried to bulk as aggressively as he did when he was younger, because he literally got himself up to, like, I think he said 275 at like somewhere in the 20%, mid to high 20% body fat. And he's only like 5'6". So he was just a freaking rocked up bowling ball. But a lot of that weight he gained was fat mass. And because of this, he now has some loose skin around his sides, which just annoys him. I'm not saying anything that he hasn't said before. Now, there obviously is going to be some differences in weight loss when it comes to gender. First and foremost, a lot of it comes down to hormone. If you've got two individuals that are sedentary, overweight, and you put them on a training program, one's male, one's female, the male is probably going to progress faster for a number of reasons. One, he's bigger to start with. Bigger body, heavier body, burns more calories at rest anyways. Two, he's got the advantage of testosterone, which is in theory going to make it a little bit easier for him to put on lean mass during that period of time than it is going to be for the female. And so between those two, yeah, your average guy is going to be able to gain and lose weight a little bit faster, excuse me, than your average female. But that being said, there's still not that massive of a difference between the two genders. The key is, like anything else, it's going to always come down to the deficit. You typically want to sit about only a grand total of effectively 500 calories above or below what's needed to maintain their body mass. And then from there, after a week or two, assess the weight loss progress. So hence, if they've gained that pound or lost that pound, okay, cool, we'll stay that course. They've gained or lost 2 pounds. Okay, let's maybe decrease the caloric deficit or caloric surplus a little bit, because we're gaining weight a little bit more and losing it a little more aggressively than we want. Or there's no change. Okay, well then we need to increase that deficit or surplus and be able to go through and really look at it with a pretty even hand. So when you're working with athletes and you're trying to lose weight, let's be logical here. When is probably the only good time to get your athlete to, or try to have your athlete lose weight? Not necessarily, and that's more of weight class. Yes, Josh. Off season is the time where we should manipulate weight, because we don't have all the stressors of being in season. We don't have all the stressors of being preseason. This is the period of time where we can be a little bit more aggressive with a weight loss phase with our athlete. Yes, it's going to cut into the hypertrophy phase or maybe running during this period of time, but if they really need to lose weight that badly, and it's not just about recomp, it's about losing body weight, then, well, that's what you have to do. Having an athlete trying to lose weight during season is, once again, really setting them up for some issues. And having specific goals for progress. So hence, if you've got an offensive lineman, that is a great point, Josh. That is a great point. Practicing the same task with a new body feels very different as well. Absolutely. And especially depending on, in really any sport, it's going to change up a little bit of the leverages, and then maybe certain movements are going to be easier, certain movements are going to be harder. So absolutely, when you're going to the skill component, thank you for bringing that up. But when we're having these goals, think about an actual, like, what's a realistic rate of change? So if you're dealing with, and this is not for weight loss, you're dealing with an athlete that's trying to gain weight, okay? If you've got a football player, he's 220 and he needs to get to be 300 pounds by the time he graduates, well, if you've got 4 years, 20 pounds a year, that's feasible. Whereas if you say you need to get that guy to 300 pounds or get him just to 240 pounds in a month, which I've heard that level of stupidity from a head basketball coach here. Don't get me wrong, he got fired. He's no longer at this university at the time of which you're recording this. But if you are good at math, you can figure out probably which coach it was, because I haven't been here for that too terribly long. But he was literally yelling at our head strength coach because this basketball player needed to gain 20 pounds in the preseason in 1 month for the season, which is just bonkers insane, unless you want to have the athlete quit playing their sport and just focus on weight gain. Because here's the problem with coaches saying that this kid needs to weigh this much, this kid needs to weigh that much. What should the coach have just done in the first place, if that's really what they care about?
Recruited someone else?
Yes, Jai, recruit that guy in the first place. Go recruit the bodybuilder. Go recruit the sumo wrestler. Go recruit the stick figure. Whatever you need, so you have whatever body type that you think is going to be what plays the sport, go for it. But you recruited an athlete to play a sport. And yes, it takes time to have these changes. And that's why it's important to be realistic. Because you're going to have athletes that are good kids and they really want to gain weight quickly and put on a lean mass. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, you guys don't have to admit it. But I know, with our baseball guys, and they're trying to get strong. They're trying to get strong. How many pounds have you gained since you came to college here to play ball?
Probably 20.
25.
And this is your guys' junior or senior year?
This is my senior year.
Senior year.
You guys only put on 25 pounds in 4 years. Most freshmen put on 15. Well, I thought that was a good joke. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Now, what's the key difference with those 15 pounds your average freshman is putting on over the 20, 25 pounds you guys have put on over effectively 4 years of training.
The body fat percentage has stayed relatively the same.
Bingo. It's not easy to gain a lot of lean mass. Muscle mass is hard fought for. It takes time. And I think that's an important thing that obviously you guys have an appreciation for, which is you don't build it in a day. Like it takes a lot of time to build an appreciable amount of lean mass. And that's the thing. If I was to go work with, your team and, sit down with the baseball players and be like, okay, you guys, want to bulk up. You guys understand that steroids are really useful in the sport of baseball. Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds. I'll be coughing all night if I keep going that route. So there's obviously use to being bigger and more muscular, but I probably would actually tell you and your teammates that a good realistic expectation, plus you guys got spring ball, a lot of the guys play summer ball. So really you only have the fall and the winter to really try to gain some lean mass when you can put a lot of concerted effort into it. If we manage to put on 5 pounds each year, I'll consider that year was a success. Like we did okay. We didn't like knock it out of the park, but that's still pretty darn good. If you could somehow put on 10 pounds of lean mass, and maybe that's a guy that's never touched a weight before in his life, and we've got access to a lot better eating and recovery than he has before, that's not unheard of for maybe the first year, but then he's going to have those diminishing returns each year as he goes through. And let's face it, he's probably going to be gaining more fat than just those 10 pounds of lean mass in that period of time. So does that make sense to you guys? Giving ourselves goals, giving ourselves realistic expectations of how we can manipulate an athlete's body weight over time, that's going to allow them to be successful, and making sure that we're helping still maintain good relationships with food, our bodies, and how we're going to perform. Awesome. So strategy is simple. We're going to do weekly weigh-ins, how frequently we're going to test body comp, what metrics are we going to be following in the gym, on the field, so we can see that performance is going in the way that we want. Obviously, common mistakes is going too aggressive, trying to do everything at once, not having a good understanding of just our caloric intake and our normal exercise levels. Obviously, there's things you can do to make weight for competitions and otherwise. When it comes to water manipulation, I'll talk with you guys about that at length. It's horrible to do. It's really hard on your body. I've done it a number of times, but I haven't had to do it in close to a decade now, and I'm not upset about that. But I can talk you guys through it if you want, but I'm not going to record it because a lot of people might do really dumb things with it. And obviously the same type situation with weight gain. People can be far too aggressive and effectively start gaining a lot of weight that they're not supposed to, or that they shouldn't be. And that's where, if you guys have never heard of the meaning frog tech, I will bring that up in a little bit so we can maybe have ourselves a little bit of a giggle. But in the interim, do we have any questions, comments, concerns over effectively what we want to do if we're really trying to manipulate weight with our athletes?
I do not have a question or concern about this, but my Zoom was acting up in the beginning, so I have no clue is the class still going to go, or is there time for questions at the end?
Yeah, we'll still do questions and do a basic. We're going to do a review for your final at the very end. But with the last activity we're going to do, this is that link that I sent you guys. So you might have to scroll up in the chat to see it. And we're going to have you guys work in effectively 3 separate groups. Okay. My goal for you guys is to kind of get a better idea of some of the absurd things here. So because I have a little bit too much fun with looking at metrics. Okay. So group 1, actually, you know what? We're going to make this more democratic because we've already got a group 1, 2, and 3. I want you guys to pick a athlete that is either insanely small or insanely massive.
Like within the class or like in general?
No, just like an athlete in general.
Could you repeat the question? My Wi-Fi was acting up.
No worries. I want you guys to pick an athlete that's either insanely small or insanely big. DK Metcalf? Who's that?
He's a freak of a wide receiver.
All right. So Okay. Guy just says juiced football player. So that would be okay. So we'll
He's talking about DK Metcalf being a juice football player.
cool. Good for him. I mean, drug testing is not hard to pass if you know what you're doing.
DK Metcalf.
Cam, are you okay, buddy? You can unmute yourself.
DK Metcalf does not juice. He's just a beast of an athlete who doesn't leave the gym. Don't speak on DK Metcalf like that.
And he drinks strawberry milk.
Well,
Tomato,
guys,
tomato.
genetics are always a major component. Actually, what's a really cool thing, this is another conversation I had with my friend Mike, because he's very much so into the bodybuilding culture. You guys have heard of Kai Green before, the pro bodybuilder?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Kai Green got up to 220 pounds on stage for like bodybuilding before he ever started using steroids. And Kai Green, I think, is only like 5'6", 5'7", or maybe 5'8". Like, he's not tall.
His braid is longer than him.
But think about it. He got up to 220 pounds, like lean on stage without using any drugs. There's people out there that can do things that are beyond reason of what most people think. And there's a lot of guys, I mean, you can go to the rec where you can see people that are using anabolic agents and they can barely squat 315. They can't even pull 400. Like, I'm disappointed and sad for them. Like, you're using drugs that are likely shortening your life to lift weights that a lot of, not, sorry, this is pretentious, but some of us were just doing in high school. And that's not a compliment. Okay, and then, okay, Jake Lewis's group. You already put one in there. We got DK Metcalf for your group. But I need somebody from, I need Allison, Blaine, Ian, or Ryan to give me some either really small or really big athlete you guys want to look at. Otherwise, I'm putting in Brian Shaw. Ooh, okay, we're gonna go with Michael Phelps. I like that. Okay. So here's the weight manipulations you guys are going to be looking at. Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and talk you guys through it using the Brian Shaw example. So it's so cool. Now you guys are going to go onto expert mode where there's a lot more fun information you can put in there. But for me, I'm just going to go ahead and use, just use the basic one. Okay. So Brian Shaw, I think, is about 450 pounds. He's male. I think we're just going to say he's 40. I know he's getting older. I think he's what, 6'8"? And then his physical activity level, his work is breathing, staying alive. And then we'll say he's moderately active. Oh, regular at least once a week? No, we're gonna go with active. Okay. Next up, his goal weight. We're gonna get him down to 200 pounds in interesting. We'll see what it gives me. Might not allow me to have as much fun with it as I like. 365 days. Might be too great of a weight swing. Okay, we'll go 250. Okay. Next up, to reach his goal, he's going to not change his physical activity whatsoever. Screw that. In order to maintain his weight, in theory, it figures he needs to put down 5,300 calories per day, which is probably, it is less than he's probably taking in per day, but the fascinating thing is it's obviously up there pretty high. Notice, in order to reach that goal, he has to take in only 1,771 calories per day. But then once he gets there, he can eat 3,590 calories. So just 1 year of eating effectively, 1/3 of his normal intake. And then he can go up to just over 2/3 of it for the rest of his life. Yay, science. Okay. But if I switch to expert mode, notice our extrapolations of weight. So there's a chance that effectively he's going to go and get to that weight, or after that period of time, not made as much of a change as he wants, because we didn't have as big of a deficit as we thought. And the antithesis is true, where he might actually lose weight more aggressively. And so what's interesting is if we double our measurement period and see where he'd be at there. And you can see how actually, even when he gets that target weight change or weight, he might actually start going upwards, because it turns out his resting metabolic rate would be much lower than we suspect. And the antithesis can be true, where he would actually keep losing weight, even though we thought we had him in caloric balance, because like anything else, we can always make extrapolations that aren't accurate. So in a group, that's what you guys are going to come up with. It's not just what the weight would be. Obviously, that's what it's going to change to, but we're looking at how many calories. You can feel free to change the physical activity. And then notice you can also change the physical activity during the maintenance phase. So that'll be after effectively 2 years. And from there, how many calories they're going to have to do, what's going to happen as far as, are we going to try to be less physically active? What can we do to make this to be a little less unpleasant when it comes to caloric changes? Questions, comments, concerns before I send you guys back into your individual groups to have some fun with this? All right, guys. Well, have fun. I'll see you guys in let's give it about 5-6 minutes, and we'll go ahead and let us know calories that are required during, or current calories that are required during, calories at the end, and then how all that's going to play together. So I've been talking to myself for the past couple minutes, so that makes sense now. I was kind of wondering why you guys didn't say anything, so that's cool. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. That was special. I guess it also mutes me whenever I leave the breakout rooms. Hooray. Yeah, so you guys put up your information pretty good. Specifically, obviously interested in seeing how, not just the calories you'd need, but then obviously what would happen for if they didn't lose weight or gain weight as fast as you wanted, and vice versa. What happens if they overshoot your goals, and then what would the extrapolation be over a year? And that can be pretty fascinating what you can come up with. So, if we have something that's not just so insane, but take someone who's actually a normal sized human and trying to get them to say 108, oh Jesus, 180 pounds. Nice. And Yeah, so you can actually literally put in all this stuff. So you go add medium walking for 30 minutes, 7 times per week. And then you can even add another exercise, and that's where it's going to be able to then extrapolate what you'd have in those situations. And so we can see over the real long period of time how we're going to have a lot more information of what's going on. And notice now we've got massive error variance. So on the high end, after a full year, they might only be 200 pounds. So they didn't make it to the 180. Others might make it all the way down to 161. And then after a full year, maybe even lose a little more weight or start to really trend back up. And that's where the genetic variability for resting metabolic rate and all those other factors can really get people if you're not careful. So the last little bit I just wanted to talk on briefly, which is nutrigenomics. And effectively, it's just the interaction of your genetics, your lifestyle, and your overall health, and boom, what's going on. So it turns out your genetics are really complicated. There's a lot going on. I've also recorded this lecture before, obviously past spring, since obviously we went online, if you guys want to look into it. But the key is there's definitely situations where some folks can't handle certain nutrients, and that like phenylketonuria. So this is individually at PKU. That's why you see warning labels on certain foods which says, warning contains phenylalanine, because literally they can't break down phenylalanine and get the toxic levels inside of their body, thanks to literally genetics. And then also understanding that, yeah, there's probably some positive effects from using certain things like omega-3 fatty acids and otherwise. This is looking at genome expression in just flatworms, which is not even humans, and you see how many genes there are. And then we get to humans and it's just a fustercluck. And so thanks to what we eat, that in turn is going to influence our metabolism, which in turn is going to influence what genes we're transcribing, and then in turn, which is going to be which proteins and metabolic pathways we're utilizing more, which then feeds back and is going to always be filtered by the reality of everything else going in your life. Like I said, super, super complicated. So it's just important to understand that this is very much so in its infancy. We can say that some individuals, thanks to genetics, can actually have an influence on genetic health, higher risk for cancer rate if they don't get enough folate. Other individuals are going to have situations where there's going to be changes on glucose receptors for increasing risk for obesity. Obviously, ApoE4, we're going to talk about Alzheimer and visceral adiposity. Increasing selenium intake, if you have a number of different 28 genetic markers, increase your risk for Crohn's, and zinc has been related with increased risk for IBS if you don't get enough zinc, and you have 4 different genes that are related to it. This is just signaling pathway stuff for omega-3 fatty acids. Turns out it's important for making sure you're not developing plaque, aka you want to make sure you get enough omega-3 so it doesn't happen. Same thing also you're going to find a little bit with DHEA, just a lot of flow charts. So what can we tell you is just don't eat a bad diet, so to speak, meaning a lot of processed foods, a lot of things in there that you don't need. Eating a lot of fruits, vegetables, making sure you're getting all your vitamins, minerals, and being physically active. Woo. It's really not that exciting. But more importantly, this is your review. What do you guys want to talk about? What do you guys want to go through? What have we not had a chance to talk on yet that you guys are interested in? What do you guys want to review for your final?
What's going to be on it?
Everything we've covered in this class. Boom, done. See you later. Have a good night, guys. Yeah, no worries, Abby. Give me 1 second. So remember effectively signaling cascades are going to be effectively how our body is going to cause any of the long-term positive changes we want from training, or not necessarily training, but just stress in general. So a stress is applied to the body. This in turn creates some type of cellular signal. This signal is going to then activate a number of proteins, which in turn is going to literally, typically activate our DNA to express the messenger RNA specifically to this signal, which in turn is going to code for the proteins that are of use. So a great example of this here would be something like whenever you get a tan, it's going to signal for your body to effectively, produce more melanin. And then remember that initial signal is going to be relatively quick and abrupt. It's going to start typically, not necessarily in seconds, but obviously this can be minutes or over the course of an hour. But then the sensor proteins, which are going to activate a myriad of other proteins, that cascade is going to take hours, okay? Which in turn, the transcription and translation, so the actual building of more protein, that is going to be something that's going to take place over a day, and the actual synthesis fully of those proteins can potentially take usually up to about 72 hours, and you've effectively done all the muscle building you're going to do. Guys, it's okay if you don't have any questions right now. You guys can submit them to me over email, and then I'll go ahead and make sure I answer those before the Thanksgiving holiday. And then that way you guys have got those to study on. Does that sound like a better decision if you guys feel like you're a little cooked tonight? Okay, so let's go with that, guys. We'll call it a night here, okay? Thank you guys for making this work to the best of your ability with obviously the realities that we find ourselves in these days. Stay safe out there. Study through your materials, go through your notes, think about what you were asked about on the first two exams, because you're going to see obviously similar questions. Hint, probably something about calories in and calories out. And from there, make sure you're using that King of the Hill, make sure you guys are doing your metabolic projects. There is that extra credit that I know some of you guys used over figuring out the dietary needs of a superhero. Yeah, otherwise take care of yourselves, guys. Good luck. Remember, you can always take the final early, but you can't take it late. So, that's different. Anyways, so stay safe out there, guys, and talk to you guys more soon. Bye-bye.